Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you again for stopping by. I do appreciate it. Time is money after all. I'd first of all like to thank Julian V.F. Roberts and his Old Mutual PLC board for the opportunity to present my view about Sub-Saharan Africa, the EAC in Kenya today. And really a very interesting board, I must admit, most enjoyable and engaging. Wide breadth of people, and of course a very legendary Zoe Cruz, who worked at Morgan Stanley many years ago, and a number of other people, and I thank them again for giving me that opportunity. Sometimes you think it's a little bit like catwalk, isn't it? You're sort of putting your best foot forward and looking forward to hopefully collaborating in the future, and indeed I am. We've uploaded the Mindspeak session on Rich TV, that's the one with Dr.Titus Naikuni, and didn't he resonate big time on social media in particular? It's also scientific now, you can tell, how big and how long a tail a story has, and it has the longest of long tails, I must say. I'll put up a photograph just about a year and a half ago that we took of ourselves when I got to see him about something, and another one of the sunrise as seen from a Kenya Airways aeroplane. Home Thoughts, we are also uploading the interview I did with MG Vasanji 2 days ago. That, I'm told, is going to be up in the next half hour or so. Of course, the reason he was here was the launch of his new book, The Magic of Cider, which is extremely powerful. And it's centered around this Kiswahili town called Kilwa, and they actually found coins from Kilwa in Australia. Some centuries-old coins on the beach. It's quite an interesting story of that in itself. But Kilwa, anyway, the town where Kamal, an Indo-African, grew up and returns to, is 1,000 years old, a haunt of spirits. All those who died and never made it to the house of God, all those suicides and all those murdered, and the infant deaths, the jinns who accompanied the Persians and Arabs who came here long ago. And that's just a sentence or two out of a really remarkable book. Thoroughly enjoyed my interview, rather sort of forced myself on him. I've read all his books. I said to him, I discovered he'd been interviewed by folks who hadn't read any. So I said to him, well, there you go, passion and all of that. We will upload that today. Political Reflections, Norway says it's time for Uganda to reduce troops in South Sudan. It is now important that President Museveni of Uganda starts the process of reducing and later pulling out the Ugandan troops that are in Juba and surrounding areas. This is the Norwegian Foreign Minister, Borge Brende, telling Reuters. I also appeal to President al-Bashir of Sudan to refrain from any kind of intervention, he said, noting that Sudan, which frets about South Sudanese oil fields, from which it derives revenues via pipeline fees, had so far stayed out. Ethiopia, which currently chairs IGAD, earlier voiced concerns about Uganda's intervention. Others in the grouping, which aims to set up a ceasefire monitoring mechanism, had played down worries about Uganda's role. Uganda's role has proven to be quite interesting. For a very long time, I continue to see South Sudan as the epicenter of the collision between the US and China. In particular, China sources most of that oil. Then, of course, you've got the South Sudanese interaction with the US, Garang, the evangelical churches, the fact that it's Christian, and you have this sort of close support. And I think, the US would like to remove China from that. But what's happened is, I think the US, Ethiopia, and Norway, evidently, were behind Machar. I think on the other side, interestingly, another US ally, President Museveni, found himself on the side of Salva Kiir, and I think he moved at speed to consolidate Kiir's position, which was interesting, and might be slightly out of sync with what his other allies might have wanted. South Sudan has freed 7 detainees accused of a coup plot. Freed 7 senior political figures on Wednesday who had been arrested on suspicion of plotting a coup, partially meeting a rebel demand and peace talks focused on ending weeks of fighting. Interestingly, one of my good friends from South Sudan, who was previously a minister foreign affairs, and we kept in touch. He's now, I saw this photograph from Reuters, he turns out to be Salva Kiir's chief emissary in these negotiations, which I thought was interesting. I'll put up a photograph of the River Nile taken 1,521 days ago in Juba at an Italian restaurant which is on the banks of the Nile. And I give you one final quote from my political reflections. I found this in an article in Asia Times. In modern global diplomacy, everybody speaks with anybody, and anybody's actions have an impact on everybody. I thought that was pretty good. The Euro 136.26, dollar index firming up 18.72, but very gradual. We're still below that 81.06 level I spoke about previously. Yen 102.34, touched 101.77 on Jan 27th, which was the strongest level for the yen since December the 6th. The Swiss franc 0.8978, the Swissy and the yen, good barometers of risk appetite in the markets. Pound 165.26, Aussie 0.8727, the India rupee 62.83, the won weaker at 10.81, Rial 243.52, the Egyptian pound 696.26, and I heard a headline that the Saudis are probably about to put in $4 billion more. And really, I think the Saudis, the UAE and Kuwait have been decisive in stabilizing the financial markets in Egypt. South African rand 11.2863, oh my, oh my. And I wrote that piece when I spoke about 12, but let's get to that in a minute. The yen has advanced 4.3% in 2014, the biggest gain in Bloomberg correlation-weighted indices that track 10 developed nation currencies. Dollar 1.2% gain, Euro 0.4%. Canada's dollar is the worst performer, falling 4.5%. The Aussie's down 1.2%. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index. It's still churning around this area. We broke much higher than the level we're currently at some point last year. The Federal Open Market Committee said yesterday it will cut monthly bond purchases by 10 billion to 65 billion. Citing labour market indicators that were mixed but on balance showed further improvement and economic growth that has picked up in recent quarters, they said. We've got to keep an eye on what's going on. I think they're signalling clearly that they feel comfortable that the economy has now gained its own momentum and traction. And I think the US will put in a pretty strong year this year, and I think that's why President Obama was saying, believe it, and all of that kind of thing, that rhetoric. Euro dollar 136.26. A little bit softer. Dollar yen 102.34. I'll put up a 3-month chart of that, and that was that touched 101.77 not too long ago, so that must be the target for the bulls. Japan says they've started a search for new jets for the Emperor and Prime Minister, preparing to replace the aging 747-400 used on official visits by the Emperor and the Prime Minister after more than 2 decades of service. Authorities have asked interested parties to meet February 3 to brief about the purchase plan and receive feedback, according to Jan 7 notice. Planes will need to be fitted with secure communication devices, rooms and other equipment, and should be able to fly directly to the US East Coast, where Washington is about 10,900 kilometers from Tokyo. I discovered this. The 2013 list price for a wide-body Boeing 777-300ER is $320.2 million. Put up a photograph of Kenya Airways' purchase of the same plane that I took 87 days ago when the president came to name it. Boeing dropped the most in 2 years after it forecast profit for 2014 that fell short of analysts' estimates amid a slowing pace of jet orders. Coming to the commodity markets, gold was last trading at $1262.30, and that's a trading sell in my opinion. I'll put up a 1-year chart for you to have a look at. Crude oil still firm, but below 100 at $97.53. Prices are down 1.1% in January. I think it's a great place to sell it if you can get 3 digits. Coming to Africa, China's stadium diplomacy in Africa. This is a story by Elliot Ross. In Maputo, the garden for sculptors behind the Musée National de Arte on Avenida Ho Chi Minh has become a kind of prison yard for Mozambique's various Ozymandiases, a semi-public dumping ground where colonial monuments now crumble quietly away. A marble European baroness reclines in thick robes. The grass is growing up around her base. Both of her arms have been lopped off, but her amputated left hand still touches the midriff of a black male slave, crouched in a loincloth by her side. Nearby, a decapitated Lady Justice presides over a small patch of weeds and bare earth. No longer public art, but not quite garbage. These are the monuments which were extracted like rotten teeth from the city's squares and public buildings when Portuguese colonial rule finally ended, but which nobody could quite bring themselves to destroy. Maputo is a fabulous city, by the way, well worth a visit. One August afternoon I chanced upon the newest addition to this miserable collection. Face down in the dirt lies an enormous bronze angel, wings stretched high over its head like some kind of massive avian academy award. Walking around it to its jagged base, ripped from wherever it had once been rooted, I found that the figure was completely hollow. Inside there was a small plaque whose Chinese characters I could not read. Intrigued, I went back into the museum and asked the receptionist there where this gigantic statue had come from and why it had been dumped here. He answered with the air of someone patiently explaining something very obvious to someone very dull. The angel had been erected in 2011 by the Chinese government in front of the new National Soccer Stadium. But when Mozambican officials saw that the statue had a Chinese face, they decided it wouldn't do to have a Chinese angel in front of their national stadium, tore it down and trucked it into town to join the rest of Maputo's unwanted colonial trappings, the garden for sculptors. Talking about Mozambique's new national stadium, Chinese have built the airport, which is rather good, by the way, overseen the construction of the new parliament building and a new palace of justice in the last few years, saying if you want to see the heart of China's soft power push into Africa, you'll find it in the continent's new stadia. Then talking about that they completed their first stadium project in 1970 with the Amman Stadium in Zanzibar, and then subsequently they built all these other ones all over. And I accept that over 50 stadia have been built since 2010. No, by 2010, over 50 stadia have been built. My point was that, that's the fact. These very big, symbolic buildings like the AU building, and I'm not sure if that resonates with the people. It resonates with the government, certainly. CCTV is another example of the soft power component of China's Africa engagement. And I wrote about soft power. I was actually talking about Al Jazeera then, but it applies to CCTV. Water is fluid and yielding, but water will wear away rock, which is rigid and cannot yield. As a rule, whatever is fluid, soft, and yielding will overcome whatever is rigid and hard. This is another paradox. What is soft is strong. That was said by Lao Tzu, and I still love that. And on that note, I'll put up two photographs. One of myself waiting for an interview with Beijing, and they've got this tremendous studio here in Nairobi, and also a selfie with Pang Xinhua, who's the bureau chief. And I think actually finds me curiously interesting. And I said to him, have you ever done a selfie? And my girls, I told you, banned me from taking any more, because I discovered this is the sort of thing that they do. So I started taking a few. But now I've been told off, said it's not appropriate for somebody like myself. Anyway, I took one with him, because, and he said to me, only girls take selfies. I said, no, President Obama does as well, and David Cameron. And that lady, they were all both interested in, it seemed, at Mandela's funeral. I'll put up a photograph of the Stade de l'Amitié Sino-Gabonese from Libreville, Gabon. Now moving to the markets, the South African all shares down 1.42% this year, and as I said, the rand has come under huge pressure. I'll put up a 1 month chart and you'll see it's last trading at 11.2809. And as I said on the 20th of January, if the taper turns helter-skelter, and it's threatened to, then the rand might even hit to 12. I'll put up a 1 month chart and you can see how weak it's been. To chants of his nickname, Juju, Julius Malema strode by women, blowing kisses, and men raised clenched fists as he campaigned to whip up support for this year's election, with a call to nationalize South Africa's mines, banks, and land. The crowd cheered when he called President Jacob Zuma's administration the African National Criminals Government. Oof, he speaks well. And there is this deep disillusion in South Africa. And actually, my presentation to El Mutual, I said, stay long the hinterland of sub-Saharan Africa, stay short South Africa. And I said this actually when I was at that Credit Suisse conference in Switzerland as well. And subsequent to that, you know, the rand has fallen a great deal. But he's a real populist, isn't he? The South African SARB raised rates to 5.5% yesterday. No one really expected that. I think 50 basis points is neither here nor there. When you've got the Turks, putting things up by 400 plus. Egyptian pound 696.30. We've been here for a little while. The Egyptian stock market up 8.79% this year at a fresh May 2010 high, and really has been outperforming. And again, I cannot but not believe that the Saudis and their ilk have been supporting that market on a medium-term perspective. I like this comment by Dr. Ahmed Heikel, who's this extraordinary character actually, who I've interviewed before. Africa is the story, the big story is Africa. The Chinese and Japanese are fighting over Africa. This is a market of 1 billion people, of natural resources, he said. I'll put up a link to an interview I did with him not too long ago. And Kareem Sadek was a super guest at Mindspeak, and I remember him saying many things. The thing that stuck in my mind is, do not get too close to politics in order to survive regime change. Nigeria all share negative 1.3% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange plus 4.11% in a fresh all-time high. Interesting article in something called the Somali Current. The link is on the website, saying offshore Somali coast beneath the Indian Ocean floor lies multi-billion barrels of oil and hundreds of trillion cubic feet of natural gas. And, I've been talking about this for a while. I've said it before that I believe the eastern seaboard of Africa is clearly the last great energy prize in the 21st century. And I believe this lake of hydrocarbons stretches from Mozambique up through Tanzania, Kenya, Somalia, and I wrote that on the 4th of June 2012. ICBC have agreed to buy control of Standard Bank's trading unit, $765 million for 60% with a 5-year option to acquire an additional 20% stake in the unit. Coming to Kenya, East African countries have put their security forces on alert. I was telling you that security alert levels were at post-Westgate highs. After a spate of blasts in Kenya raised fears of more Al-Qaeda-linked jihadi terrorist attacks in the region. This is Katrina Manson, Financial Times. Kenyan and Ethiopian officials this week said that Islamic terrorism is their main security threat. Diplomats and security experts worry that a series of attempted attacks, including on a tourist bus and on a coffee shop at Nairobi airport, could be a prelude to a serious incident. Attacks came less than 6 months after Westgate. What we are doing is enhancing security around our ministries, installations, and the whole city, said Amina Mohammed, the Foreign Affairs Minister. Obviously, concern is all around the Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab, of course, took responsibility for Westgate, and Berhane Gebre-Christos, Ethiopian State Minister for Foreign Affairs, said Al-Shabaab was the greatest threat against Addis Ababa and by extension Kenya as well. Saying Ms. Mohammed said investigations into a January 16 blast at Nairobi airport, which was initially played down by police, pointed towards Al-Shabaab as the most likely suspects. We are still investigating to get the full details of what really happened. There were Somalis who did it, she said. A note from the regional security officer at the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi to mission employees, which was seen by the Financial Times, also pointed to a terrorist attack It said that an IED exploded in a rubbish bin near the Java House restaurant outside Terminal 1 at Nairobi Airport on January the 16th. The note also cited other grenade attacks in various locations throughout Kenya, not least of which Diani on the south coast. Clearly, security threat levels have increased. I said in my presentation to Old Mutual that the asymmetric threat remains very, very potent, I'm afraid. And of course, I'll put up that photograph I took of Westgate. Moi-era political elite exits top at CFC Stanbic shareholders list. This was a group called Africa Liaison Consultant Services that were a top 10 shareholder. It's called Alico, Charles Jonjo, Jeremiah Kireni. And I think it's a positive move for the bank as well, because you didn't want to really be carrying that kind of reputation at this point in time. CFC Stanbic up 5.747% in 2014, and frankly I think it's a very undervalued share, headed towards 120. Tusky supermarkets say they're going to open more small retail outlets and petrol stations. The Kenya shilling is at 86.074, the Nairobi All Shares up 3.38%. It rallied 5.795% at the start of the year through Friday last, and then has fallen 2.28% this week in over 3 sessions on a profit taking, and I'll come to it in a moment. NSE 20 is up 1.8% this year. And then I rather like this flip-flop art manufactured by Ocean Soul. I bought something of theirs once. Tell me what you think. As I said, we've been on a weakening trend. I think it's going to be 4 down sessions in a row today. Met a wall of profit-taking pressure yesterday, retreated 1.457%, that's the all share. Remember, it hit an all-time high Friday, 3 days down. Volatility, I think, seen in emerging markets, climaxing in last midnight strike by the Turkish Central Bank. And weakness in South Africa and Nigeria, both negative for the year, might well have finally imported some caution and a desire to book gains. Foreign investors yesterday accounted for 23.9% of purchases, 64.2% of sales, so you can see their posture right away. The agricultural sector seems to be just heading its own way. Of course, Rio Pingo has been the catalyst for that re-rating. Kakuzi up 18.94% this year to record. Sasini Tea up 34.12% at a 52-week high. Williamson Tea up 23.2%. Safaricom closed yesterday at 11.85. Remember, we closed at 12.45 last Friday. We're in a bit of a profit-taking situation. Car in general, which reported full-year results and some corporate action around its shares, rallied sharply 22.45% yesterday and is now the best performing share at the stock market, up 50% in January alone. Diamond Trust has been heavily traded of late. It's at a record high 223 and has been setting a sequence of lifetime highs on very heavy volume, so keep that in mind. KCB is traded heavily this week after that investor relations phone call they held, and it closed at 45.50. This is the area of price support for it. Record high 50 from last year. And then BOC Kenya snapped a 12-session losing streak, was the best performing share, got overtaken by Car in general. It's up 42.4% in this year alone, which is pretty remarkable. I haven't got a good reason for it. There are other people tell me there are some good reasons for it, but we do get these price spikes and then they sort of tend to evaporate like we saw in carb acid. Once again, thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it. In point of fact.